Thanks everyone for joining. I am Vanessa Candela. As Miel noted, I was on a panel earlier today, so it's good to see everybody again. In this smaller group, hopefully we'll have lots of interaction. Just a quick high level, Nancy and I are going to introduce ourselves briefly, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what is a GC slash CLO, and my perspective on the difference there, and then what skills we think are needed, and then kind of beyond the skills, what are the paths to getting there? And then some key tips and practical steps around what we think would be useful for you. So we really would love for this to be interactive. So if you have questions, why don't you throw them in the chat and we will try and answer them as we go. Or if the group's small enough, we can probably open up the lines to folks to do that. So with that, let me tell you just kind of a little bit about my background. I see some familiar names and faces of folks that were on some of my teams here, so I'll be boring some of you. But so I sort of took a traditional path, as one might call it. I started at a large law firm. I was a summer associate, and then went to Foley Hoag, and I was there for about 7 years. And I went in my first in-house job was at EMC, so I had a decision point where I was deciding whether to do the partnership thing at a big law firm or go in-house. And I had this opportunity pop up, mostly because, or in part because, the hiring attorney at EMC was my co-op employer when I was in law school, like 8 or 9 years prior to that. So I ended up going over to EMC, spent about 9 years there doing all sorts of corporate work, M&A, investments, securities, general corporate stuff. And then took a 2-year stint at one of the subsidiaries. I did a rotation. They asked me if I would be willing to drive up to Bedford on a daily basis and go work for our security subsidiary. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But got some experience there. Then I circled back to EMC, where I went back to doing all the corporate stuff, got as much exposure as I can there. And then EMC acquired a company called VirtuStream, which was a cloud-based company. They were an IaaS, infrastructure as a service company, actually. And they were leaving it out there as an independent company. And I got tapped to interview with the CEO, who was the founder CEO, who was staying on board, and ended up getting that role, which was quite timely because at the time that I was looking at that job, Dell had announced that it was acquiring EMC. And for those of you that have been in the corporate world or in the M&A world, you know that corporate attorneys of 2 large public companies don't typically survive. Not everybody survives, so to speak. So I sort of knew that there was going to be a change in the works. And then I spent 2 years at VirtuStream, and then I got tapped for a GC job at Netcracker Technology, which is a subsidiary of a Japanese parent company called NEC Corporation that many of you have probably heard of. I spent 3 years there doing completely different things than I had done at VirtuStream or EMC. Really loved it, had a great team that I worked with there. And then got tapped for what I'll call my dream job, which is where I am now, which is I am the CLO at a company called Celonis. They're actually a German Munich-based company that has expanded to the US. So we have dual headquarters in New York City and Germany in Munich. But really growing dramatically in the US, and we're a pre-IPO unicorn, really looking to IPO in the future. This is something I've always wanted to do, and finally got an opportunity for a good company to do that. So here I am, I'm 4 weeks in almost today, drinking from a fire hose, and I'll talk a little bit about that too, and kind of how I positioned myself to get this job. But finally have kind of landed this, and I'm hoping it's all it was cracked up to be. So we'll see. I am completely underwater at this point, trying to figure out what's what. With that, Nancy, you want to give everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for that. That's interesting. So Nancy Reiner, I'm a partner at Major Lindsey in Africa. Prior to this job, I was at Brown Rudnick for most of my career, kind of grew up there. Before that, I was at Goodwin. And I was very lucky because I got to work on some great cases. I was a litigator We sued the tobacco companies on behalf of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and several other states in New England. We sued gun companies on behalf of the city of Boston and some other cities. So I had a great time. I did a lot of environmental litigation as well. But after about 20 years, 20 years combined, I was ready for a transition. And I always loved being a connector. So I always loved helping my friends find a partner or a house or a job. And so the first thing I did is I started a nonprofit called Green Pro Bono, which is still around. It's about a decade old, and we match green startups and climate change focused organizations with pro bono attorneys from the major firms and from some in-house legal departments. But I also am a matchmaker at my job. I was recruited by a friend in our Chicago office, and I work in the in-house legal recruiting department at Major Lindsey. So I only focus on in-house. And since I joined almost 10 years ago, we've placed dozens and dozens of general counsel over the years. Some of the exciting ones have been general counsel at Greenpeace, general counsel at Southern Poverty Law Center. We do, because we're in Boston, we do a lot of placements at life science companies, biotech and pharma and diagnostics and med device. And of course, a lot of tech companies, the two big industries in Massachusetts. And then of course, universities. We do a lot of general counsel searches at universities and at hospitals. We placed the general counsel at Partners Healthcare, which was a lot of fun. It's actually a different name right now. But one of the changes since I joined is the role has really transformed from a law role. Like when I was a litigator, they always say that lawyers at law firms, they're a lawyer who understands the business. But what I learned is the transition into in-house is you're really a business person who understands the law, but you're a business person first. And that change has really grown since I've started. And I just was recently talking to a general counsel and said, what's the most important thing to you for a replacement, for her succession planning? And she said, I want someone with strong business acumen who happens to know the law. And that seems to be the theme today. The other thing is there seems, and I think that, I know that Vanessa will talk about this later, but we often hear now that CEOs and the executive leadership are looking for a consigliere. They don't just want a lawyer, they want a strategic partner, a visionary, they want a strategist, a big picture person. And that seems to be the word that every client is using now. When I started, everyone used the word that they wanted someone with gravitas. So that's changed a little too. But in either event, they definitely want someone higher level than they used to. And of course, while they do want that business strategist, they also want someone who can scale down when necessary. So now, Vanessa, I think you're going to talk about what we're talking about today. Although I think you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, I think I already mentioned that. I think we can jump into, what's
been out of our order.
I know, I'm sorry. I messed this up.
You did great. So the next step then is we'll talk about what is a general counsel today, which I just touched on. But 20 years ago, the GC was the deal maker. The GC was in the weeds. Now there's a strategic partner, as I just mentioned, with strong business acumen. And also the GC has become the CLO. Even if they're not in the C-suite by title, if they're not a chief legal officer, they often work with the C-suite. And we see that a lot more than we used to. So why don't you tell us, since you're identified as a chief legal officer now, why don't you talk about your experiences and your role?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. My first role was a GC. My title was general counsel. It wasn't really much different in substance, but in title for sure. And after that, I went from Virtue Stream, where I was the GC, to Netcracker, where I was the GC. And as I was, taking on more responsibility at Netcracker, I said, look, I am not, if you start to differentiate between GC and CLO, which I want to talk a little bit about, because when I first started seeing it, I was like, well, what the heck is the difference anyway? Like, what does it matter? And it matters exactly because of what Nancy said. You want to be seen as a member of the C-suite. And if you're not a member of the C-suite, you don't get the respect that the C-suite gets, both from the rest of the organization, but more importantly, from your peers on the C-suite. And I think that it became really important to me when I was at Netcracker that I was given that title, And so I pushed for it, and it didn't take much pushing. To be honest with you, my CEO was really good and supportive and on board with it. But there is a difference, and it's not just perception. I think, a general counsel role is just that. They have a team of people, or they do it themselves. They execute deals, they negotiate contracts. They're really in the weeds, in my view. I think a chief legal officer takes on a different role, and it's more of a strategic role. And look, you can, no matter what they call you, you can have that function within your organization. But I've insisted at every company that I've been at, where I've been in this role, that I report directly to the CEO. I would never report to the CFO. I would never report to the COO. I would never report to the president. I would insist on reporting to the CEO. I think it takes out any potential for conflict of interest. It also gives you a clear and direct line to the CEO, which you need, and a clear and direct line to the board, which you need. Depending upon your organization, that becomes more and more important. So I view them, they're comparable, and you can call it whatever you want, but whatever it is you're called, I would insist on those things. You're reporting to the CEO, you're a member of the C-suite. That is how you affect change, a lot of the change that we were talking about earlier today. And it's also how you protect the company better. Because if you're not in the C-suite is going to make decisions over you, and you're not going to have much say in it. That's my my learning and my perspective on that piece. But what else is it? So let's call ourselves the chief legal officers, position ourselves as a member of the C-suite and a strategic advisor. What do the CEOs want? When I was interviewing for one of my companies, the CEO said to me, I've never really had a real GC. Who's your customer, and your internal customer? He's like, I guess it's the head of sales. And I kind of looked at him and I said, you're my primary customer. And he said, really? Like, it was mind-boggling to him. So I started to talk to him about, what does a good GC do for the company? And we talked a lot about risk management, a lot about thinking strategically, being aligned with the business, understanding what the business is and does, so that we can do our job better. And I gave him a couple of examples, and he was like, okay. And so you start to get these CEOs who have never, particularly at private, smaller companies, who have never had or thought of their top legal person as a strategic advisor. And if you can become that trusted advisor, it's, number one, so much more fun from my perspective. But two, you really can start to have an impact on the business, and then an impact on things that you're passionate about. So the things we were talking about this morning, if you're passionate about diversity and inclusion, you're passionate about environment, or whatever it is that you feel strongly about, you can start to have a greater impact once you become that trusted advisor to the company, and you can start to gain that trust with your CEO and your board. What else? We're going to talk a little bit about, what do you need to be, or what do you need to have, the key traits that you need to have in order to be a successful CLO. I'd say, and we'll go into the different types of skill sets, but, building a foundation through your experience and having your, legal baseline. I got to the point where, when I was interviewing for my last couple of jobs, they'd say, well, I assume you're qualified because, I'm not a lawyer. I can't quiz you on, your legal acumen. But what else can you do for me? And that speaks to what I was saying before about, here's all the things I can be. I'm a business advisor. I can think strategically. Lawyers bring a different analytical approach, I think, to business problems that you don't get necessarily from your chief revenue officer or your chief operating officer or one of your other C-suite members. We think sort of neutrally and in a way that they're not used to hearing. I think we're also really good at telling CEOs what they don't really want to hear sometimes. And we can get away with it because we're lawyers and they're scared, of what happens if we don't do it. So having that and showing them helps you become a CLO, in my mind. So really focusing on the business. So the gravitas that Nancy was talking about before, strategic thinking, really being a true business partner. I talked a lot about being a business partner when I was coming into my new role, because one, it's absolutely what I believe strongly, and that is my philosophy around being a CLO at a technology company. And also like just showing, that I think that really resonated with the executive team that I met with. I asked a lot of questions about the business, not about risk, not about, what do your contracts look like and, where are you doing business? It was like, tell me about the technology. What are we selling? What is it solving for our customers? How do you give me your pitch? How do we pitch this? Things like that. And I think that was not what they're used to hearing from candidates for this role. So that's it. I don't know, Nancy, if you had anything else that you wanted me to touch on.
No, that was interesting. That was interesting.
And guys, feel free to jump in. I don't know, our chat looks like it's the full chat. So,
Yeah.
but feel free to raise your hand I think we can do it here.
Yeah, but we can talk about the hard skills and the soft skills.
Yeah, no, for sure. So we talked about my perspective, Nancy, and I touched a little bit about the different kind of skill sets. So you hear people talking about hard skills, soft skills, and relationship building. Can we deep dive on that a little bit? And maybe you can talk about the hard skills that you think are table stakes when you talk to your clients about what are you looking for in a GC? What are the hard skills that you hear?
Yeah, and also just to be clear, because I didn't understand anything about recruiting when I was practicing, but when I say client, when Vanessa says client, I mean the companies or the universities or the hospitals who are looking for the general counsel. So, so hard skills, another word for hard skills is lots of different words. It could be technical skills, legal expertise, substantive experience, but it's all the same. It's what kind of substantive skills you need to become a general counsel. And later we'll talk about how to get there. But it really depends on the industry and on the company, the mission of the organization and the specific sector. For example, as Vanessa touched on, if it's a public company, they want a general counsel or an attorney with public company experience, securities experience. That is key. If it's a highly regulated company like pharma, they want pharma experience or some kind of life science experience. And if it's financial services, they want that experience with relevant regulations. But generally, I think across the board, when you look at the key substantive area that they're looking for in general counsel, it's being a corporate generalist with broad-based legal subject matter expertise. And so it's always great to get exposure to as many areas as possible. But within corporate, we look at commercial transactions, mergers and acquisitions, capital markets, private equity, finance, all the things that are incredibly hot right now, almost post-COVID. So, as far as like getting financial services, like hone your financial experience, hone your financial acumen, and do you know how to read a balance sheet? Those kind of issues come up. The second area would be corporate governance. A lot of the general counsel roles also include being a secretary to the board. So they want secretarial experience and strong corporate governance experience. And then of course, management experience, being a people manager, leading a legal department. They often ask how many direct and indirect reports do our candidates have? And they want information on that. They want information on leadership style. And then, we talked this morning about DEI. That is very hot right now. They want someone with experience in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they want someone with experience in environmental, social, and governance reporting. It's a voluntary public company reporting act right now, but it's really helpful if you have ESG experience. And then other substantive areas that get included, wrapped up in what they're looking for. It doesn't include everything, but almost everything is compliance and regulatory, litigation, international. Legal operations is growing because everyone's looking for ways to cut costs and make the legal departments and the company more efficient. And then of course, if it's pharma or life science or tech, IP is important. Labor and employment is always important because of HR and executive comp. So, those are the sort of the key areas for the hard skills. The less tangible ones, the harder skill set to really define are the soft skills. It's very subjective. It's like emotional intelligence and self-awareness. They're the personal attributes that we put on all of our job descriptions and the success factors. that really help determine a candidate's fit into the role. And it's probably, more important than the substantive skills because they just assume you have that based on your experience. Some clients really consider curiosity and intellectual horsepower the most important thing, and other clients really want someone who's collaborative and a good listener. So, it really depends on the culture of the company. But Vanessa, what do you see as critical soft skills to becoming a successful general counsel?
Yeah, and I just want to say on the hard skills, don't be intimidated by the list of skills that Nancy ticked off there. I think, having some of it, being kind of an expert in something and then just getting exposure to the rest of it is good. And I can talk a little bit about, sort of my experience there. But on the soft skills, so important. And we talk about this all the time. And the interesting, I was really struck this morning by some of the conversation around this, because I think, I had executive presence in my list of things that are critical in order to become a GC or a successful GC. And I think that's still right, but I think we need to be careful about how we, what that means, right? But more on that. I'm going to work on that in my own world here. But I think you need to really think about building your brand. You hear that a lot, and probably 10 years ago, I'd be like, I don't even know what that means. What do I do with that? But really think about what's important to you around your soft skills. Being a good listener is incredibly important as a CLO. You have to have emotional intelligence and be able to read a room and all of that, but you really need to be a good listener. And when you listen, you hear things about the business that you might not otherwise understand. And so that gives you opportunity to become business advisor and sort of help bridge the gap between people that are, having conversations about something on the technical business side that you might have an input on. Be a trusted advisor, act with integrity, do the right thing. The first GC I worked for, we used to say it all the time when we'd say, what do? We have this difficult situation and sales wants to do X and I'm uncomfortable about it, or, this is happening here. And he would say, at the end of the day, do the right thing and trust your instincts. And I think that's a skill, a sort of a soft skill that you have to start to build, sort of business judgment, really, that allows you to know this doesn't feel right and I need to trust my instincts and make the right decision and give the right advice here. Communication skills are hugely important. How do you build that? You push yourself into uncomfortable situations where you have to communicate. You create opportunities for yourself to speak in front of a board or speak at an executive meeting. I can remember very clearly, I was maybe 6 months into my first in-house role, and my GC and manager at the time asked me to present to the CFO at EMC on a particular topic. And I was petrified, and all I could think of was I'm not qualified. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Here's a million excuses in my head for why I shouldn't be the one to do this. And I could have very easily said, no, you do it, to my manager, who would have stepped in if I wasn't willing to step up. And I didn't, so I pushed myself. And I way over prepared for the meeting. And I probably spent, 50 hours, getting ready for this 30-minute meeting to talk about this one topic. And I went in and I walked through the issue and he asked me one question and it was over in about 5 minutes and I was way over prepared. But it taught me a lot about just, pushing myself to learn how to have that executive presence, to learn how to communicate to executives. I was given that opportunity, which I'm forever grateful for because I learned a lot from it. And then, have been in the boardroom a million times since then. And I think you get better and better at it, but don't back down from those kinds of opportunities to build your soft skills, because they become critically important no matter what you end up doing, but especially if you want to be a CLO, because you will be tested in terms of whether or not you can make decisions under pressure, right? Answer heavy questions from executives. You'll be pushed and challenged to give an okay for things that you don't think are okay. And you've got to learn how to have the soft skills to put yourself in that position successfully. So that's kind of the hard skills. Those are the soft skills. Does anybody have any questions? I see one question in the chat, Nancy, about would you recommend getting formal business training, MBA or executive MBA, to better perform the job? It's probably kind of a hard skills question.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, go ahead. Do you have a perspective on that? Do you see people asking for that for CLOs?
No, but we often will have a client that will say, oh, they got an MBA, you know, that I want to meet this person. I mean, it is a plus, but you have to really want to do it. You shouldn't do it because it will look good on your resume. I think if you just have a passion for applying your business skills to the law, I think that's when you should do it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I wish there are many times over my career where I wished I had done a joint JD MBA at Northeastern, because it was such an awesome program, and it just would have tacked on 1 year. And also because if you want to be in a corporation, profit or nonprofit, you know, knowing your way around a balance sheet is really helpful. Nancy mentioned that earlier. Just kind of generally understanding what financial statements are and how they work and how business works. It definitely cannot hurt, and it's a resume builder. Based on what Nancy said.
Yeah.
So we talked about hard skills, we talked about soft skills. One thing that I always think is really important in networking anyway, but also in becoming a successful CLO and getting that job and then being successful in that job is relationship building. Do you agree with that, Nancy? And if so, you know, how do you recommend people do that?
Sure. So of course, you know, it's important to be seen and be heard, and to continue to build your network. Make it really every part of your day. And even if you do it just because, you know, of life, it's important. It's not only just to go in-house. I mean, when I practiced, I probably was a terrible networker. I never made an effort. I just wanted to get home after work. When I joined MLA, it became a real important thing. And now it's just every day, every second, it just gives me endorphins. I mean, I just got a client because I met this HR person getting my nails done. We were drying our nails together and started chatting. And then I forgot about it, but I gave her my card. And then 3 weeks ago, she emailed and she said, I don't know if you remember me, but we have the few legal needs. And it's for a very exciting company. So, you know, a lot of the recruiters, a lot of the successful ones are ones who just really just want to meet people. Like I love meeting new people all the time, no matter what. And that's a big asset to even looking for a general counsel position. So if you are in-house right now, it's really important to build effective relationships throughout your organization, you know, and build an executive presence, mostly with members of the executive team, but with everyone. If you have an opportunity, you know, to meet up with some executive team members, then take that opportunity and just don't wait to be invited. You can invite them or you can introduce yourself to them. But it's a very proactive, a very intentional and strategic way to do it. And I think it's really important for relationship building. So when you go to meetings that you weren't necessarily invited to, but you go, be an active participant and get to know the leaders and find those opportunities for board engagement. Vanessa talked a little about board engagement. Get to know the board members. They are very key, you know, they're key decision makers and good people to get to know. And when opportunities arise, take some leadership roles or find the roles within your organization. They're there. And usually there's a vacuum. Like everything else, you know, get outside your comfort zone. I heard that Vanessa did that when she prepared for that speech and I mean, for that talk. And it seemed like it was a positive thing, even though it was only a few minutes. Get exposed, I'll say it again, you know, get exposed to senior executives on complex projects. Like if you volunteer to do complex projects, you'll get exposed to them. And something that comes up in-house all the time is, you know, they don't want the legal team to be the no department, the doctor knows they call them. Be the yes department. In other words, if someone asks, you know, one of the clients in-house asks you about doing something, don't say, no, you can't do it, like the law firms would do, but say, okay, that's a good idea, but let's do it this way instead of this way. Always show an alternative so that, you know, it's not just no, and people aren't running away from you when they see you walking towards them. Just show good judgment and make a track record of showing good judgment. And, you know, we talked a lot about the business part. So really understand the business inside and out. And navigate between the different business segments with the respective leaders. There's an intersection always in every company between the law and the business. It could be in the manufacturing area, it could be quality control, finance, marketing, business development. It could be joining, becoming a partner with the CFO. But it's really important to partner with those business colleagues and with the business leaders. So in your company, just make sure people throughout the whole organization know who you are. So we talked about the CLO role today, what the skills are that are required and relationship building. But I'd love to hear Vanessa's story about how she approached her career, because it's really fascinating how she landed. I mean, this is your third GC job, your third CLO job, which is really wonderful. So what kind of steps did you take to get there and to get there and to become a compelling candidate?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of hard work and a whole lot of luck, and really just positioning, building relationships so that it positioned for later. So I'll talk a little bit about hard skills, relationships, and soft skills that we talked about before. But I say this every year, anytime they give me an opportunity to speak, is like, so my first co-op was Foley, or my second co-op, I guess. I worked for a judge, and then I co-opted at Foley as a summer associate. That was my first job. Then I did another firm for my third co-op, and then I did EMC in-house for my fourth co-op. So I sort of knew I wanted to go on this path early on. So I talk about I did take a pretty traditional path, but I built relationships at each of those places. And so, when I was at EMC, I made sure that I met as many people as I could, so that when this opportunity, coincidentally, but luck, there's my luck a little bit, popped up, I picked up the phone and I called the guy that I had worked for, who I said, hey, I saw you're hiring, or the department's hiring, and I see you're still there. Do you remember me? It was 2007 and I had co-opted in like 99 or something. And he was like, of course I remember you. I'm quite certain he lied, because he was probably like Googling me, trying to remember who the heck I was. He said, look, I'm down to my last two candidates. We're probably going to make an offer soon, but come on in, we'll chat. And, we may end up opening up another position soon. And I was like, all right, whatever. So I went and I met with him. And then the markets were, I don't know what was happening at EMC at the time, because it was actually before the market crashed, because the market crashed after I started there. But long story short, they had a hiring freeze. And so I went back to the firm, and then I sort of had this, I'm not going to use the term that I was going to say. I sort of had this like moment where I thought, okay, what do I want to do here? Do I want to make partner? Do I not? I had a 15-month-old at the time. I probably was going to have another kid, or figured I probably would, and was trying to make all those life decisions. But they came back 5 months later and said, hey, come on back in. We want to have you meet with other people. We're still looking at those two candidates, but we're going to open it up for you. So it was, huge opportunity. Never would have gotten that opportunity had I not built that relationship when I was a co-op student, and then leveraged it later when I said, hey, remember me. So the co-ops work, not just because it's a great thing to do and you learn a lot, but also you build relationships there. So everywhere you are, you need to build relationships. So I did that. That got me my my first in-house job, right? And then once I was in-house, I worked with the corporate development team at EMC quite extensively. The corp dev team then was responsible for the acquisition of VirtueStream. They were working one of the women that I worked with in particular was working really closely with the CEO, and ended up getting an offer to be his chief of staff. She said, hey, you need a GC. He's like, yeah, I know. Do you know anybody? She gave me a call and she's like, hey, are you interested? You're the first person I thought of, because we worked so closely together in the corp dev side. So again, I built that relationship, was a trusted business advisor. It ended up giving me this other opportunity. So I went and interviewed and got that job. So building great references like that by doing great work, working with purpose, being a good business advisor, taking opportunities, relationships are so critical to becoming a GC. I have to say that. On the hard skill side, so I'd say, baseline, I went to the law firm. I obviously got a good general corporate base. And that laid the groundwork for me to go in-house and be closer to the business and kind of do the corporate stuff. when I was at EMC, going back to taking opportunities, building your hard skills, other than that CFO meeting that was helpful, I got an opportunity to go to our subsidiary RSA, like I mentioned earlier. When I was there, I did all sorts of stuff, and it was a lot more commercial and licensing work than I ever had any interest in doing, to be honest with you. I really like the corporate, sexy transaction side of the world. But I thought, well, I'm going to learn something here and, build out that skill set. About 6 months after I started, RSA was breached in one of the biggest cybersecurity attacks at that time. And we went into full-blown crisis mode. So while it was not a good thing for the company, from a professional development perspective, it was pretty awesome. I got to learn so much about crisis management, PR. They put me in charge of like dealing with customers, because we had to communicate with customers, make sure we were compliant with the contracts. We didn't even know what was accessed, what wasn't accessed, it was, sort of at the beginning of the crazy cyber attacks. And we were a security company. So you can imagine the PR mess that we were in, because the security company had been attacked and didn't know it for some time, right? So that was awesome. Again, had I not said, okay, they'd kill me if they heard me saying that was awesome. But if I hadn't have taken the opportunity and said, you know what, I don't really want to do the commercial work, but I'm going to go learn something and build my resume and build my skill set, I never would have gotten that opportunity. Got exposed to all the executives, because of course, when it happened, the executives came swarming. We were sitting in Bedford, and all of a sudden, Joe Ticci and David Goulden and all these guys who were the CEO and CFO rolled up. The board got involved. It was obviously a big deal. So I got tons of exposure there. So there's my other, second example, take opportunities. They may not seem that exciting, but you never know what kind of exposure you're going to get. And then, then I went to Netcracker, and Netcracker is a completely different world from the EMC VirtuStream RSA world. Private company subsidiary of a Japanese parent. I was in Tokyo twice a year at least for board meetings, got exposure there, got some international experience, which really helped me land this job. And then also got a lot of government relations experience. When I started, it's public. They had just signed a non-prosecution agreement with the US government over some government contracting stuff. And I knew nothing about litigation other than the limited exposure I'd had kind of tangentially over the years, but got involved in that, became the primary point of contact in my role with the US government, gave me tons of new experience. Again, I was like, how do I talk to the Department of Justice? I don't know what this means. What do you say when this is happening? And how am I not going to trip over myself here without having any, litigation experience? Learned a ton, just, kind of dug in there. About 6 months in, the CEO asked me if I wanted to take over leadership of the global security organization. And again, in my head, because this is what we do as women, I said, no way, is he insane? I can't do this. I don't know anything about security. How can I do this? And then, I kind of shoved those demons aside and came in on Monday morning and said, you know what, I'll do it. I'll take it and I'll figure it out. And again, so I did. So now at this point, I had kind of built up my hard skills over the course of these 3 or 4 companies, worked on my soft skills, really continued to work on my relationships as I was going through that. And then ended up at Celonis, or getting the opportunity at Celonis. And the reason I did is because I had international experience, I had security experience, I had corporate and securities experience from my days at EMC. And had experience growing and building legal organizations. So just, I tell you this, I'm happy to answer any questions around this, but I can't stress enough, some of it was luck for sure. But I think a lot of it is just putting yourself in uncomfortable positions so that you push yourself to learn, which opens up more doors. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I think, those are kind of, we talked about table stakes, and that's my career path. If anybody has any questions around any of that, happy to answer. You can put it in the chat, or I don't know, raise your hand. There's a small enough group here that I can probably just call on people. but thought, there's really no one way to do this. I did kind of take a traditional path, big firm, in-house, and kind of work my way up through it. But Nancy, maybe you can help with some practical advice from the outside. How do we help these guys land their dream GC job, whether they're coming from a law firm or coming from in-house somewhere else?
Sure. So, so just a big picture, 30,000 feet down, there's, just a few ways that I'll discuss. One is succession planning. If you're in-house right now, very often companies like to promote from within. And so all the tips that we talk about and, being very business savvy and making your connections all help in that with succession planning. It could also be through your network, which I'll talk about. And then there's job boards, and there are tons of other executive legal search firms like Major Lindsey. We have a lot of competitors, but the real important thing is to pursue this journey through as many avenues as possible, to have as many touch points as you can. And so I'm going to list a lot of practical steps, and it's going to be, there's a lot of them. So you should pick and choose because, it's more than a full-time job if you do everything, but pick and choose what's important to you and what resonates with you. But the most important thing, and Vanessa touched on this, is to be recognized in your industry. Once you know what industry you want to stay in or you want to be in, continue to tap that network because people forget what you do. My best friends forget what I do all the time. So get on those short lists. Very often a general counsel will reach out to a colleague and say, I need a succession plan here. I'm thinking of leaving. Do you know anyone who would be a good general counsel? And very often, that person will start giving that person names. So be one of those names and, be that answer. So how do you get there? Of course, you should build your experience. And once you build your experience, your network will expand. But there's also, shorter ways, smaller ways to do it. Like now that many of us are getting vaccinated and events are going to open up, go to events. When I first started Major Lindsey, I went to like an event every night, but you have to really like it. You can't go if it's going to be a drag. Like you should do it with events that you care about, things that you're passionate about. Like I often go to the BBA diversity event every year. They honor somebody who works hard in diversity. They're the best. It's the best audience. I love those kind of events. So find things that you're passionate about and then go to those events. And when you go, network. Don't sit in the corner like some people I know. And bring your business card. Don't forget your business card. But people go to these events because they want to meet other people. And one of the things that helped me when I first started going, I always had a pit in my stomach. And then I went to a networking like coach, a speech, and she said, everyone has a little like pit in their stomach when they walk in. So I realized if everyone has a pit in their stomach, then what's the purpose of having a pit in your stomach? She made my pit in my stomach go away. And I would go up to people who are either standing alone, or you can go up to, groups of people. These are people who want to network. That's why they go to these things. So they will open up their little, their little space for you. I mean, and the 1% chance that person doesn't, then it's their problem. And you walk to another group.
It's like the middle school playground, right? Sometimes.
Right. Only they really want to meet you in these events. Focus on the industry that you're interested in, or if you want to, change from your industry, go to those industries, but look for places where you think that there'll be good contacts. Maybe some contacts that are speaking, look for the thought leaders. And also something people don't think about are about law firm partners. If you network with law firm partners, they have their clients. They know everything about their clients. They know the general counsel, the CEO, the board members, and they're in the know. So they often get calls. Because we end up getting those calls because we have a partner placement group in Major Lindsey. They get calls from their clients, saying, we need a general counsel. Can you help us? And then, of course, it's important to leverage others, like seek out mentoring from current GCs and join groups. Join groups like the ACC, American Corporate Counsel, is a phenomenal group to join. There's the Minority Corporate Counsel, the Hispanic National Bar Association, Women's Bar Association. There's something very active in Boston called WILIF, Women in Law Empowerment Fund, National Association of Women Lawyers. I mean, there are just tons of women attorney organizations. And then there are, based on your industry, there are specific in-house groups for the industries. There's a really strong biotech GC group and a very strong tech GC group. I mean, really for any industry. But make your expertise and your abilities known. And again, follow your passions. I mentioned the BBA diversity event. I go to events about climate change. I'm really fascinated by disruptive startups that could change the world. So I go to those things at like MIT about, changing the world through technology. And then become known as a thought leader in your community. I'm sure that, this is said everywhere, but speak on panels, write articles. One of the secrets is that when Major Lindsey and other executive search firms maybe are looking for general counsel candidates, I often will go look to see who's speaking at some of these industry conferences, and I'll reach out. Maybe they're not interested in looking for leaving their company, but they might know others. So just good to get your name out there, in speaking. And then LinkedIn, update your LinkedIn profile, because in-house companies in HR departments are looking at LinkedIn profiles now. LinkedIn is phenomenal. We look at LinkedIn, our research committee looks at LinkedIn all the time. So make sure that you have a robust profile, but not too wordy. So it sort of has to have that, that in between. And then of course, attend professional continuing ed and professional development programs and seminars. This Practicing Law Institute, the ACC, specific industry groups. And don't be afraid to ask. Again, just like walking into networking events, most people will happily share their expertise and their connections. And I think especially women, because we all need to be united. And don't be afraid to ask for follow-up calls or for follow-up coffees I'm from New York, once things open up. And then, job postings. Look on job postings. There's a website called goinhouse.com. We have 10 minutes. Goinhouse.com, which has a lot of general counsel opportunities. LinkedIn, Indeed, search firm websites, and then industry websites. If you're looking at universities, NACUA, National Association of Colleges and Universities, have listings for general counsel at their company, at their universities. And CLOC is Corporate Legal Operations Council. They post jobs. So, and then finally, executive search firms like our competitors, like reach out to them, send your resume, because they're looking for really top quality candidates when they do their searches. So basically, I think that the theme here is that there's not one way to become GC ready. There's several different paths. Personally, I think it's really important to learn to have fun doing this. I think you'll be more successful if you have fun doing it. But there's just lots of different ways to get there, and we wish you luck. And we'd love to answer some questions. So maybe, I think you can just go off mute and ask questions if you have any questions, or do the chat.
Yeah, for sure. While we're waiting for people in case they have questions, it's interesting because you were talking about attending all these things and joining all these groups, and I am like horrible at that. I really am terrible. I've never been good at it. I do it and I smile through it, and I have done it when I needed to, but I'm not one of those people that's out there all the time, and I should have been. But that, there's different paths to getting there. And I think, now, frankly, I just don't have time. I'm hoping once COVID opens up and I, am anxious to get out of my home office where I've been sitting for the last, 15, 16 months now at this point, that I'll force myself out to get out and do it. And I think actually the Zoom things there's been a lot of sort of Zoom conferences and stuff, which makes it easier for a lot of us that don't have a lot of time to kind of balance it. For me, it's like, well, if I can jump on a Zoom for an hour, I can do that. But to get in my car, go into Boston, do the whole thing and then drive home, that's like a 3-hour endeavor. And like, I've got teenagers and responsibilities and all that other good stuff. So,
yeah,
so do what you're comfortable with. What's that?
I remember how crazy my days were. I don't miss that at all. But
yeah.
One thing I was thinking, I forgot to mention that I do a lot of, and it's been very helpful, but I read a lot of articles. I just love to sort of keep my finger on the pulse. And so if I see somebody was just named as a general counsel, I might send her an email congratulating her. I landed 2 major searches at a really phenomenal company that I'm in love with, just by saying congratulations on your new role. So then when she had 2 legal needs for senior vice presidents, she reached out because I was the only recruiter that she knew. So the same
Mhm.
thing when you're looking for a GC job or a high level job, like reach out. If you read an article that someone's quoted, in fact, I saw you quoted, Vanessa. I was going to reach out to you and say, great article. You were just recently quoted like 2 weeks ago, and you're on my to-do list to say, great,
Yeah.
great quotes. I mean, people love to know that somebody knows about them or reads about them, because very few people do follow up and do that. So that's a quick thing where you don't have to go take the T into Boston to go to an event. Just read articles and then send little notes to people.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say that, because so they announced my appointment at Celonis, because Celonis is sort of this, it's most people have never heard of it up here or in the US, but in Germany it's a big deal, and they're a kind of pre-IPO unicorn, so the bankers are all kind of excited about it and whatever. So they announced it, and there was an article, and then I got interviewed by law.com, and then for lawyers, I was kind of like, who cares about me, like it's not that interesting. But now there's like all of these articles, mostly in Europe, because we're a German-based company. So there's like all these articles in Dutch and whatever that I can't even read. But my point is, it's kind of exciting to be, have that kind of attention in our world, our, little legal world and in the tech world. But I've gotten a ton, like hundreds of reach outs on LinkedIn, and is opening up my network in a way that I hadn't seen before, but I'm responding to every single one of those reach outs. So like I've gotten congratulations from everybody I know, but a lot of people saying, hey, I saw this article on law.com, or somebody in Germany saying, hey, I know Celonis and I just saw this, and congratulations, great company, whatever. I have every day, like 50 or 60 or more come in a day, and I'm trying to respond to all of them. But it resonates, right? And you think like this person's going to get hundreds of them and they don't care. If they're paying attention and they're trying to expand their network, and like I will be hiring a lot in the next year or so. All those people that reached out to me, I'll be looking through there. Is there anybody here that might fit one of these roles? And if somebody reaches out to me now and says, hey, I'm in-house, or I'm at a law firm and I'm trying to do the jump and I've got experience in corporate, let's talk. Somebody that I never would have talked to before, now I'm thinking, hey, I need a corporate securities lawyer really badly. Like, I'm going to talk to this person, right? So don't be afraid to do that. I probably never would have done that when I was, kind of coming up. I wish I was the person that would have done it. And I'm telling you now, don't be afraid to do it, because the worst case scenario, somebody just doesn't respond to you, right? And then who cares? You go back into the LinkedIn ether. But best case scenario is they do respond, and now you've made a connection with somebody that's probably going to hire in the next couple of years, because GC in-house departments are growing like crazy. The markets are going crazy. Tech is going crazy. We're all hiring or will be hiring in the next couple of years, especially if you hit a hyper growth company or reach out to somebody that's interesting. So great way to get in, to then build your resume to get to a GC role. It's great. I can tell you guys to do everything I didn't do and knew I should have as I was building my career. But Nancy's right. All of these things are critically important, because not everybody's going to have sort of the direct path. So go build those relationships.
And I think, I think a lot of it is LinkedIn. I really attribute it
It
to,
is.
because I remember when I was practicing, a colleague of mine was a healthcare, not a lawyer, but a healthcare consultant. She wrote an article in the Boston Globe. It was like a big article, and in the editorial section. And I, sent her an email congratulating her. And she said, you're the only one that, I mean, this is before LinkedIn. So now it's very easy for people to see it.
Right.
You're the only one that congratulated me. And I know people saw that article, but this was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so we're lucky that we have LinkedIn now, that people,
LinkedIn is huge.
It's very easy to respond to people when they post an article.
Yes. Build out your LinkedIn profile. I can't stress that enough, because in-house recruiters, I have a team of, I don't know, there's like 50 recruiters at Celonis right now, and that's where they go, right? They have multiple places that they go, but they do searches because they have premium, memberships or whatever, and they do searches on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
I think we're going to get kicked off here, because I think the Zoom will shut down. But
yeah,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Feel free to follow up with us if you have any questions. I mean, this is what I do every day. So definitely, reach out. I think they give you our emails.
Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of the conference, everybody. Take care, and hope to see you soon. Good luck with your searches.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Nancy.